So good morning, my dear students. We are back again, and let's proceed with our history classes. So in the last few classes, we had been discussing about India, the name, the physical features, then we came across with the special features of India and many more stuff. And today we are going to discuss about something very much important regarding Indian history, and that is sources. What are the sources? Now, as a history student, history as we study, what is history? History is a record of past events. Likewise, the sources are actually, it's a record of past events and achievements of man throughout the ages. These events and achievements cannot be reproduced. It cannot be recreated. But the sources which is available is easy for us to, it helps us to reconstruct the history. Let me just ask you a question like this. Can we reproduce Ashoka? Can we reproduce Akbar? The answer would be a big no. It's quite impossible. We cannot reproduce those men. We cannot reproduce those achievements. But yet, we can reconstruct the history based on the available sources. Now, the historian's duty, the main duties of the historians is to collect the data, or they have to collect or discover the data. Not only these things, first of all, they have to discover data. Next step would be about collection. This would be an important process. Next one is the collection. First is they have to discover it. Then they have to collection or collect. And the third one, interpretate. On the available sources, whatever sources are collected, they have to interpretate. Whether they have to analyze the fact, whether it is genuine or whether it is a fake one. See, in the history or according to the sources, if there is no available sources in a recorded part, then it can just be considered as stories. How do we know Ashoka had ruled the nation or ruled among the Mauryans? Because of the sources, because of the available sources. There are a lot of many things that we need to understand. Without the sources, to reconstruct history is impossible. It can only become a very stories or legendary myths. So in this way, let us now try to understand many more other stuff in the sources part. As I've told you, let me just repeat. The main functions of a historian are to discover what? To discover the data. And then he has to make a collection of it. And final process is interpretation. As we all know that India is a land of abundance of sources, because India had been ruled by many different dynasties from ancient times. So as a matter of fact, we have got ample of sources in India. But there are few negativity part under this concept. You know what? We Indians had no strong knowledge about history. Yes, it is a fact. We Indians did not have the strong knowledge of history nor the chronology. We haven't produced any great historians like that of Herodotus or Thucydides from the Greeks. Unfortunately, Indians lacked the historical sense. Why? The Indians or the Indians in the past, they gave importance only for the religious and the spiritual attributes. They did not consider history as a history factors. They related history with the religious part. This was one drawback. But in fact, later period, it was inculcated in the minds of Indians with the coming of many number of writers and philosophers to India. But these are some of the Indian drawbacks that we study under the sources. Now, another important factors are, what are the difficulties for the Indian historians to study about Indian history? First and foremost, these Indians should have a deep knowledge in few languages of India, such as Sanskrit. To study about the Indian history, the Indian historians should have a deep knowledge about Sanskrit, followed by Pali and Prakrit. These are the three languages that a historian should have a good command. If these are the languages that he has to have a command, we also need to have another more important factor, that is, he has to have a wonderful knowledge about the script, such as Brahmi and Kharoshthi. These are the script. Brahmi and Kharoshthi were the ancient scripts. Let me tell you one more thing. All the Indian languages have derived from Brahmi. The scripts what we are following has been followed from the Brahmi, whether it is Kannada or Tamil or Telugu, Malayalam or any languages in India, all have been arrived from Brahmi. So they should have a strong hold on these two scripts. Only then the Indian sources could be deciphered. So these are some of the basic knowledge about the sources. Now, without the sources, history is incomplete, as I've already mentioned. So rightfully it is called as no sources, no history. So that is how we have to define sources. So these are some of the important factors about the sources. Next, let us go further with the major part called as archaeological sources. What are archaeological sources? Now that is again another important question. History is actually divided into two parts. That is prehistoric period and historic period. Why is it classified into two parts? Number one, during the prehistoric period, we don't find any written records. No written records. And this particularly deals with the Stone Ages. During the time of Paleolithic period, that is the Old Stone Age, Mesolithic period and the Neolithic period, we don't find any of the writings. It is only based on certain pictures or pictography. So, because there is no written records, it is considered as a prehistoric period. Now looking at the other factor, historic period, which means having the written records. So here we find with the written records, documentations, it could be through the books or the manuscripts, inscriptions and many more, which I will disclose it in another few minutes. So these are the differences between the two divisions of the history. One is prehistoric period and the other one is historic period. Under the historic period we come across with all the Indian civilization and many more dynasties of India from the ancient times to the modern period. That is actually considered as a historic period. Now, another important factors that we have to analyze here is the sources of history. Now, what are the sources of history? As I've already made a mention, sources are the reliable or the available factors to reconstruct history. So these sources of history are classified into two groups. One is archaeological sources and the other one is literary sources. What archaeological sources and literary sources are the two main branches of sources. As a PU student, or maybe when you go for a degree course in BA History, these factors are very much essential. And some students who are aspiring to become an archaeologist, take this point, it's very much important. There are a lot of careers which are based on archaeology. So from here we go further with the different other divisions of archaeological and the literary sources. Well, regarding this sources of history, as I was just explaining, archaeological sources, number one, very much important. What is archaeology? Archaeology is actually a Greek word. It has derived from the Greek word archaeos and logos. Archaeos which means ancient and logos which means research or investigate. So that is not important from your syllabus point of view. I just thought of adding it some important tidbits for your understanding. So in this regard, archaeos and logos put together, it is called as archaeology. And what is this archaeology? Archaeology is a science involving the study of human past through the materials available. So these are archaeological sources. Now we know that we have studied that there had been ancient dynasties, there had been a civilization, but what are the evidences? Now what are the evidences? So evidences like the materials that were utilized by the people of those era, the material remains of those era comes under, or those things are studied under the archaeological sources. It could again make us to reconstruct, or it again gives us an insight and knowledge about cultural and various other attributes. It helps us to know about the economical strategy or economical positions of that particular dynasty. A historian has to meticulously investigate. He has to meticulously investigate the authenticity of those available sources to reconstruct the history of any particular dynasty. In India itself, we do have many number of available source materials. It could be such as stone tools, which was related to the ancient prehistoric period. We have also discovered the stone tools. We again have discovered many number of artifacts, the mud pot, and various things have been discovered. So how the dates could be fixed? Are there again some more important components to make up this part in a more successive manner? As another important factors are considered, as I just gave an example, the coins, the seals, the terracotta figurines of civilization and inscriptions are some of the important remains that were excavated. Now the sources, under the archaeological sources, again this is classified. Under the archaeological sources, these are again classified as number one, excavations. Number two, monuments. Number three, coins. Numismatics is a technical term. Numismatics is a study of coins. Number four, paintings. And number five, epigraphy or inscriptions. Epigraphy is a study of inscriptions. So these forms under the archaeological sources. Sources, we have another important part that is called as literary sources. Literary sources are further classified into two divisions. Number one, indigenous literature, and the other one is foreign travelers' account. Alright, I hope I'm reaching you. On the left hand side of the on the archaeological sources, we have got indigenous literature and foreign travelers' account. So entire question or entire factor forms as a sources of history, and without these sources, history is incomplete, and that's the reason why it is considered as no sources, no history. It suits very much particular in this part. As a matter of fact, these divisions, now let us try to examine each and everything. And this question is there for you for 10 marks. And if it is individually given as archaeological sources, it could be asked for 5 marks. Various dynasties to unfold the truth, to reconstruct the past. These are the essential components for a historian. As a history student, it is your noble duty to rely upon these things to study furthermore. Now, first point, what are excavations? What are excavations? Excavation is a scientific digging. Excavation is a scientific digging. I am repeating that because there is a question for 1 mark. What is excavation? It's a scientific digging. You cannot carry over a crowbar or many other components and go dig in any of the places, because you don't find anything there rather than the soil or the mud or rocks. But digging in a scientific manner in a studied site, in the archaeological site, that is called as excavation. As an example I can relate you here is the Indus Valley civilization. The entire civilization or the entire city was excavated as it was buried under the mud. So this was done in a later stage. When we come to the Indus Valley civilization, we will deal more about that. But Indus Valley civilization is one of the great classic example of excavation. Followed by that, in India we have excavated at various places. Historians have excavated at various places and they have found many rich artifacts in terms of coins, in terms of utensils or the remains of seals or the terracotta figurines, as I mentioned earlier. So all these remains were excavated from the ground, and these things give more knowledgeable light to know about certain dynasties or the civilizations. There are few examples that some of the Roman coins were excavated in Tamil Nadu regions. I'll give you the names of the places where it was excavated, but before that, as I was giving an example of few Roman coins were excavated in Tamil Nadu. What does this signifies? This signifies that the Indians had trade relations with the Romans. Roman coins found in India, which is a classic example of Indian commercial relations with the Western nations. Likewise, we do have many more such things. We have many coins having the symbol of or the emblem of different dynasties. Well, I was just mentioning about archaeological sources, and under that I just made a mention on excavations, the scientific digging to unearth the sources. Now there are few places where excavations were done, and those places are Chandragiri, then Tirunelveli, Madurai, Arakkemedu. These places we have been found with some of the Roman coins. The significance of these places are, we had archaeological department or archaeological survey of India had excavated number of coins. Of course, there was again, like in foreign country like Cambodia, excavation were done. Just to mention on a glimpse on that. Takshashila, one of the ancient university of India, where once again the excavations were done. Gaya, Pataliputra, Hampi and etc. Various places in India where excavations were carried on. Even today excavations are carried on by the conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India. To fix the date of these era, how is it possible? How can we fix the date? Archaeological sources and the archaeology has depended upon two kinds of dating method. One is absolute dating method and the other one is relatively dating method. So these are the two methods. Under the absolute dating method, we do have examples such as radiocarbon dating and potassium method. These are the two methods where we can fix up the age or the era of that artifact. That is an absolute thing which makes us to give an example of which era these artifacts would have belonged to. One was radiocarbon 14 and the other one is potassium method. So these are the excavations with the unearthing of the sources and excavations conducted at various places. As this question is therefore 2 marks. Out of these 10 to 12 places, you can very well mention 3 or 4. So keep a track of these points. Moving apart, second one, monuments. Many dynasties ruled our nation, but the dynasties may not exist even today, but their tremendous contribution in terms of monuments are an exemplary testimony of that dynasties. Monuments having an historical importance, any historical importance, the physical or the structural sites having an historical importance are considered as monument. So I have listed down few of the things such as what are the historical importance or the sites which are called as monument. Number one, the forts. Already in the previous classes, I had mentioned about some of the fort. Say for example, Chitradurga Fort. So here we come across with the structure or the sites under monument. So forts are mentioned under this. Then we have got palaces. India is a land which has got number of palaces. We do have lot of temples at every directions of India. We have got ample amount of temple which has historical importance. We do have Basadi which is related with the Jainism. Basadis were the places where the Jaina Munis used to reside. So Basadis, another important factors. Statues, the statues of Gautama Buddha, the statues of Lord Gomateshwara are fine examples. And stupas are again a place where the relics are preserved under which were used during the time of Gautama Buddha. So stupa is related with Buddhism. Apart from that, we do have many such monuments. It could be either the Qutub Minar. There are lots of monuments in India. All these things holds up a very keen light on the cultural part of India. Apart from all these things, some of the another important monuments such as the temples of Khajuraho temple, the Sun Temple of Konark, Belur and Halebeedu and Hampi are another fine examples to be noted for monuments. I hope I am clear with this part, and the next section is about numismatics or the study of coins, another significant branch of archaeological sources. Questions might be arised in your mind. Sir, how does coins can be called as archaeological sources? Yes, coins also hold a significant part in the history of or in the sources. Reason is a coin denotes about economic structure. It denotes about the economic stability of the nation. Its significance about the religious aspect. It gives us an insight, valuable information on the script. At the same time, it also gives us importance in terms of languages. So these elaborate factors gives us an insight apart from the coins. So this is the reason why coins are also considered important. It speaks about the economic condition. One more thing you can add it. It fixes the period. It fixes about scripts, languages, and one more factor, religious condition. So these are the significance of the coin. In fact, there was a coin which was discovered belonged to the Guptan period, where Samudragupta is holding a musical instrument on one side of the coin, and there is another coin, another face bearing an image or engraving of a horse galloping. So what does this signifies? The example or it's just an example. This coin denotes that Samudragupta was a patronizer of music. When you look into the galloping horse, probably it meant Samudragupta might have carried on or performed Ashwamedha sacrifice during his period. So this is actually an example, or this is actually what a valuable information we can gather from the coins. So that holds an important factor related to the studies of coins such as numismatics. Alright, now let us go further with paintings. Before we go on with the paintings, I again want to mention few more things about the coins. Well, regarding the coins, in India, abundance of coins were found in gold, silver, and later centuries in copper. But these three metals were used in a high place. Reason could be simple. Availability of these metals were in abundance. Gold was in abundance in India. Silver was also available in India, as well as the copper, and then followed by many other coins and many other metals that came into existence. But these three coins holds a significant place. Many dynasties gave encouragement for the golden coins, such as Vijayanagara Empire, Guptan period, and various other dynasties. Just to highlight few, I made a mention on these two dynasties. So these holds a significant part under the numismatics. Now let us study about the paintings. What does a painting signifies? A painting signifies a vivid picture about the society. It reflects about the society. It reflects about the economic condition. It reflects about the political scenario. If you look into the paintings, as an example, Ajanta paintings. In one of the Ajanta paintings, you can just enjoy the social life of the people existed from ancient times. There are wonderful paintings on Lord Buddha. There are again many more informations that are gathered from these paintings. Important factors are such that it also gives us insight information about the hairstyles, the dress, their custom, the culture. All these things are found in the paintings. In the medieval times, there are paintings that depicts about the dresses, hairstyles, and the cultural life of the Mughals, because the Mughals encouraged paintings to the great extent. So altogether, the painting gives us wonderful information on the social life. One more example I just want to relate here. In the Ajanta painting, there is one painting that is made on Pulakeshi II receiving an ambassador from Persia. An ambassador coming to his court and he is welcoming him. So in this picture or in this painting, we can definitely make a certainty of the hairstyle, the physical appearance of the ruler, also about the relationship of Indian ruler with the foreigner. That is the significance about the paintings. Ajanta, Ellora are the best example of paintings. Moving further with inscriptions or epigraphy, one of the major source of archaeology to unearth the significant informations of any different dynasties. In India itself, more than 75,000 inscriptions were available. So you can just imagine how much of importance that this epigraphical inscription holds. Another significant part about this one is what are the inscriptions? Inscriptions. Well, regarding the epigraphical inscriptions, we do have in India itself more than 75,000 of inscriptions were available, and inscriptions were engraved on the rocks, stones, pillars, stone pillar, and even metal pillar. Iron pillars are again another example that we can relate it here, because there is an example of Guptan period where Mehrauli iron pillar is installed in the old Delhi. That's still a testimony for epigraphy. Apart from that, inscriptions on the walls, engravings on the walls, it was done during the time of Ashoka. We do have some of the palm leaves, we do have engravings on the copper plate, and we do have engravings on the seals. All these epigraphical inscriptions holds a reliable account. It is a reliable sources. The written records are most authenticated records to know about any dynasties. Though there are few drawbacks, the copper plate can be still tampered, but rest of the things cannot be tampered, and that is the reason why epigraphy is considered as the most reliable sources. You understand? Apart from all these things, what does these inscriptions speaks about? Today's world, if you buy or sell any of the commodities, there are certain documents. In those days, epigraphy played a role, or it played a role of a sale deed or decree. It played a role of a sale deed. It played a role of a decree. It also played a role of many instructions given by the kings. Not only that, if a king had constructed a pond or he had built a temple, and if he had donated to any of the trustees or different people, even the donations were engraved on these inscriptions, either in the copper plate or any other material. So this created a role of a sale deed or an authenticated piece of information. There are various examples. Parantaka II of the Chola dynasty, he had engraved the local self-body government rules and regulations on the walls. It is still found even today. It speaks about the election process, which you will study in later classes. Alright, Ashoka, for that matter, even Ashoka did not lag behind. During the time of Ashoka, after he adopting the Buddhist methods, when he converted himself into Buddhist, he had engraved the teachings of Buddha on the walls. In India, there are many places where you can find it. We will disclose it when we come across to the Mauryan period. So like that way, there are many such examples. As I was mentioning about the examples, Guptan period, Samudragupta, he had patronized a court poet called as Harisena. Achievements of wars and all the attributes of Samudragupta is found at Allahabad pillar inscription. It was composed by Harisena. Harisena had composed Allahabad pillar inscription, and it speaks volumes about the achievements of Samudragupta, of Gupta Empire. Not only Samudragupta, we do have another important ruler, Pulakeshi II of Chalukyas of Badami. His achievements are found in one of the pillar at Bagalkot district called as Aihole pillar inscription. It was composed by his court poet Ravi Kirti. This Aihole pillar inscription speaks volume about the achievements of Pulakeshi II. So in this way, inscriptions plays a very crucial and a reliable role in studying about the sources. Now coming to the languages, what are the languages that are engraved on these ones? The languages such as Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit are the major languages engraved on these part. Apart from all these things, we can say that there are regional language that are also engraved on these inscriptions. Say for example, Tamil and Kannada. For a few good reasons, the first Kannada inscription was issued during the time of Kadambas. Halmidi Shasana or Halmidi inscription of the Kadamba dynasty is a classic example. So in that way, we do have various languages engraved in the inscriptions. That is an example about the epigraphical sources. As another important factor, there are still many number of inscriptions which I am not touching it right now. As we go further with different other classes, there we find with the epigraphical sources. So these are the sources to know about the history of any dynasties. So all these things comprises under archaeological sources. Moving across to the second part is literary sources. Now in the list of literary sources, one is indigenous sources and the other one is foreign travelers account. Very simple. I will make it very simple. Indigenous sources or indigenous literature, which means the native writers of India mentioning or their writing is actually called as the indigenous sources. As you all know, India had produced many number of scribemen or rishis. From the times of rishis, there had been many writings. As another important factor, the writings as such as the religious literature played a great role in the history of India from the times of Vedic period. The Muni, Rishis with their writing comes under the indigenous literature. It also includes with the Vedas, Vedanga, Brahmanaka, Purana, epics, etc. From here itself, we do have many number of writings, starting from the Vedic period. Jaina writers, the works written by the Jaina rishis, Buddhist monks, the Buddhist monks have also written and they have also contributed to the literature part. All these things forms as an indigenous literature. To mention some more great number of names, we do have many number of poets, we do have many number of philosophers. Now again, Kautilya's Arthashastra comes under the indigenous sources. From your exam point of view, if you have got the textbook, it's very much helpful for you to know these things. But all these things are very much important, as 1 mark and 2 mark questions are given. Tripitakas of Buddhist literature, you understand? Tripitakas of Buddhist literature are equally important. You understand? And once again, coming to the another important factor, to know about the political structure, Arthashastra plays a great role. Vishakadatta had written Mudra Rakshasa, Mritya Katikam of Shudraka, celebrity poet of India by name Kalidasa, his work Malvika Agnimitra, Ritu Vamsha, Ritu Samhara, Meghadutam and many more works of Kalidasa are a testimony of indigenous sources. So we have got a lot of people in India. Coming across to the 12th centuries, we do have writers like Bilhana, who had written Vikramanka Devacharita. Kalhana, he had written Raja Tarangini, are again a wonderful piece of work. So in this way, the list goes big enough. The list goes big enough to know about the history of Vardhanas. We again have biographies. We have got biographies. Say for example, Banabhatta had written Harsha Charita. Banabhatta had written Harsha Charita. So indigenous sources in India, it's like an ocean. Aryabhata's scientific works, Romanka Siddhanta, Surya Siddhanta are again a wonderful works on astronomy. We cannot forget those things. So in that way, we have a lot of Indian poets mentioning great examples. Abundance of writings are found in India. On the work of surgery, Sushruta Samhite, Charaka Samhite are wonderful examples. These mentions about the surgeries. Patanjali again had written one great book. So all these books forms under the indigenous sources. It could be in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or any other region. Next part is about foreign travelers' account. Well, we were just going about the indigenous sources. Another important factor is foreign travelers' account. Basically, we know that India is a land of fertility, the land of great wealth, the land which was known for its natural resources. So it had attracted many number of philosophers, looters or invaders, rulers, travelers, philosophers, pilgrims, etc. Starting from the time immemorial, India have attracted these many people to our land. And in fact, among the foreign travelers' account, if you look into that part, the foreign writers or the foreign philosophers who came, saw and settled in India for few years had written many number of accounts. These accounts can be considered as a first-hand information. But there are certain limitations. These foreigners, when they came to India, it was quite difficult for them to get accustomed to the complexities of the languages, and there were a few more other barriers. But yet, they had written whatever things that they saw in India. And that again gives us a handful of informations. And in the list of few travelers who visited India with the noble thought of witnessing India and writing about the things that they have seen without any exaggeration. As early as possible, we have Megasthenes. He visited the court of Chandragupta Maurya, stayed in India for a few years, and he had written a book called as Indica. One more question from your exam point of view. Megasthenes was a Greek ambassador, came, stayed in the court of Chandragupta Maurya and written a work called as Indica. That is again a handful of information which he prescribed about the geographical conditions of India. Another important traveler called as Ptolemy, he makes a mention about geographical features of India, and many other more informations are combined in this work. Pliny from Rome, he visited India and he had written a work called as Natural Histories. That's again a great information for Indians in reconstruction of the past. Like that ways, if these people came with one intention, there were again 3 Chinese travelers who came in different timelines. Fahian came in the 4th century and he visited India with a deep thirst to know about Buddhism. He settled in India for a few years and wrote a work called as Go Ko Ki. Huensang, who visited India in the mid of 7th century, and when he visited India, it was ruled by 2 great stalwart rulers. One was Harshavardhana and the other one was Pulakeshi II of Chalukyas of Badami. He visited both the court, he stayed in their court, accepted the royal treatment, and at the same time, during his stay here, he visited many number of places which had a significant importance related to Buddhism. He visited the places of where Buddha was born, and also the place where stupas were situated, and also many of the Buddhist important centers gathered all the informations and he wrote a book called as CUK. He came with an intention of learning Buddhist philosophy. Again, he traveled towards South India, while staying in the court of Pulakeshi II, when the glorious battle of Narmada had taken place between Harshavardhana of Vardhana dynasty and Chalukya's Pulakeshi II. He has given a vivid description about the battle between these two. Later, during the 7th century, few years later on, Itzing, another Chinese traveler, visited India to know about the Buddhist philosophy. So together these people are called as a Buddhist or the Chinese Buddhist trios, Trimurtigalu. Later, if these are some of from the West and the Asian part, we have got some Muslim writers. Firdausi, during the medieval times he visited India. Babar, he himself was a great writer. His own work called as autobiography, what he had written, Tuzuk-i-Babri. Jahangir had written a Jahangir Nama. He was again an excellent writer, and during their period, Persian language and Turkish language created a great impact. Abul Fazl, he himself was a great writer. He was a good writer in the times of Akbar. He wrote a book called as Akbar Nama. Wonderful biography on Akbar was mentioned by Abul Fazl. Going further, we have got some of the many other Persian writers, Persian historians. It would be better word to suggest here. Sulaiman, visiting the court of Rashtrakutas, 9th century. He was an Arab traveler. Indeed, he was an Arab traveler. He had visited the court of Rashtrakuta Amogavarsha. Looking at the glorious conditions of the kingdom, he had mentioned this in his work. Apart from that, Al-Biruni, a Muslim traveler from Arab, he was a historian. Kitab-i-Hind was a great work written by Al-Biruni. Ibn Battuta, a Morocco traveler, he also visited India and he gave us a wonderful descriptions about India, which is a ample of evidence to reconstruct the past. And coming to a closer end of few other European writers who came from Italy in the times of Vijayanagara and their contemporary Bahmani sultans. The names are such as Niccolo Conti, he was an Italian. Duarte Barbosa, he was a Portuguese. Then Domingo Paes, he was again from Portuguese. These people visited during the time of Vijayanagar dynasty and they had witnessed such a prosperous dynasty that no words could describe the beauty of the Vijayanagar kingdom. And finally a Russian traveler, Nikitin. All these people who had visited different dynasties have given us a vivid directions and pictures and descriptions about various and glorious empires. And of course, all these holds an important place to reconstruct the history as the records given by them under the sources. So these are some of the important sources for us to study about Indian history. So based on all these factors, Indian history was reconstructed. So my dear students, so we complete with the first chapter. I hope if you have got any kinds of a doubt, you can write down a queries or mail it to me. As I've already given you my email ID, whatever queries are there, we'll have a discussion further. I wanted to give a 10-mark questions. But anyways, I've made a mention on these things. All the questions are included from this chapter in my lecture. So further queries, we'll have a discussion later. So pandemic, a great threat for you and for everyone. Last but not the least, stay home, stay safe. So we'll wind up the class here. Take care. Thank you.